For generations, the name Carol Burnett was synonymous with a certain kind of light in Hollywood, a singular warmth capable of uniting a nation in laughter. It took nothing more than the arch of an eyebrow, a softly spoken word. To the millions watching, she was grace made manifest, a soul seemingly untouched by malice, a gentle spirit. Yet, concealed behind the veil of that legendary smile, was a different woman, a private self known only to a select few, one who had been tested beyond her limits, and betrayed in the deepest of ways. Now, in the twilight of her 90-plus years, Burnett has finally chosen to speak on the few men who crossed a threshold from which there was no return. And in that small, guarded circle, one name stands apart, a betrayal that inflicted a wound far deeper than any tabloid headline ever could, a wound that would irrevocably alter the course of her life. It was the stage that forged a legend, and the crucible that would ultimately fracture a sacred bond. Back in the 1970s, the Carol Burnett Show Times was far more than a simple television program. It was a national ritual. Each Saturday evening, families would convene in the soft glow of their living room sets, drawn in by the magnetic pull of Carol Burnett and her troupe. They were there to deliver a dose of pure joy into the heart of American homes. The on-screen alchemy between Carol and her co-star, Harvey Korman, was a thing of legend, electric, organic, seemingly effortless. In their hands, the simplest of sketches were spun into comedic gold. The audience adored this dynamic duo. She was the undeniable heart of the operation, while he provided the unpredictable edge. Their timing was nothing short of perfection. Away from the cameras, their bond was a sanctuary, forged in the fires of mutual respect, unwavering trust, and years of shared creative genius. For over a decade, they were an inseparable force, but beneath this polished facade of unity, the whispers of a storm were beginning to gather. By the year 1974, the first subtle fissures started to appear. The show was deep into its 7th season, a cultural phenomenon pulling in record-shattering ratings and universal acclaim. The network, CBS, had just locked them in for another 3 years, and a 4th Emmy graced their collective mantle. From the outside, the picture was flawless, but within the hallowed walls of Studio 33 at Television City, an unspoken truth had begun to take hold. Something was fundamentally changing. A shadow had fallen over Harvey. The once effortlessly charming, lightning-quick comedian had started to retreat into himself. The show's legendary costume designer, Bob Mackie, was a first-hand witness to the mounting tension, and would later recall how Harvey had become increasingly moody, his temper short. The smallest things would set him off, Mackie recounted. You could just feel that something was consuming him from the inside. The whispers in the hallways pointed to a familiar demon, jealousy. The colossal star of Carol Burnett had begun to cast a long shadow, eclipsing his own. And while Harvey was an indispensable pillar of the show's triumph, in the court of public opinion, it was her Times show. The Carol Burnett Show, The name itself was a constant reminder. He was a man of immense pride and ambition, and the idea of living in anyone's shadow was anathema to him, not even hers. For months, the pressure built in silence, a slow simmer beneath the surface, until one fateful April afternoon when the dam finally broke. The cast and crew were in the middle of a rehearsal for an episode featuring a special guest, the celebrated British singer Petula Clark, who had just arrived from London. As Harvey ran through one of his scenes, a technical miscue with the lighting plunged half of his face into darkness. On any other day, it would have been a minor glitch, something to laugh about. But not this day. He erupted. After all these years, he roared, his voice echoing through the soundstage. Can't anyone get it right? He slammed his script onto the polished floor. A deafening silence fell over the studio. The entire crew froze in place. Even Petula Clark, the newly arrived guest, was stunned into stillness. The director, Dave Powers, moved to de-escalate the situation, but Harvey was lost in a sea of rage. And then, he uttered the words that would alter their universe forever. Even Carol doesn't notice, he spat. The sentence, delivered with a casual cruelty, landed with a weight he could never have anticipated. From her seat in the darkened audience, Carol rose, not with anger, but with a slow, deliberate grace. Her expression was a mask of calm, but her eyes held an unyielding resolve. Harvey, her voice cut through the silence, steady and clear. I've had enough. If you are incapable of respecting the people in this room, then you don't belong here. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum where not a single breath dared to stir. In his memoir, Bob Mackie would later write, even more laughs, that in that moment you could have heard a microphone pin drop. Harvey stood frozen, the color draining from his face, and then, without uttering another syllable, he turned and walked off the set. Not a soul moved to follow him. Carol returned to her chair, where she sat in perfect stillness, a solitary figure in the quiet dark, for what felt like an eternity, but was nearly half an hour. Gazing at the void where he should have been, a quiet resolve settled over her. "I never wanted this," she murmured to the empty studio, but a line was crossed. Before the studio lights had even cooled, the news hit the streets, the bold ink of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner screaming the unthinkable. Harvey Korman leaves the Carol Burnett show. And just like that, the whisper network of Hollywood ignited, a wildfire of speculation sweeping through every soundstage and backlot. The narrative quickly formed. Carol, the ever-patient star, had finally reached her breaking point after months of simmering tension. For 3 long days, the corridors of CBS buzzed with rumors, each a different version of the same fractured story. Her phone rang incessantly, friends and colleagues desperate for the truth. But Carol remained a fortress of silence. She walked onto the set, found her mark, and let the cameras roll. Her smile a mask of impenetrable professionalism. Even Vicki Lawrence, her closest confidant, couldn't break through his silence. Her calls to Harvey went unanswered. Then, on the dawn of the 3rd day, a single phone call pierced the standoff. It was Harvey. "I need to talk to Carol," he pleaded, his voice stripped of its usual bravado, trembling down the line. When she took the call, the words that followed were heavy with regret. "I was wrong. I want to come back." The following day, he walked back through the doors of Studio 33. Under the watchful eyes of the entire crew, he began a tour of apology. His final stop was Carol. "I forgot why I started," he confessed, the admission hanging in the air. Her response was not with words, but with a quiet smile and a slow, deliberate embrace. A wave of applause washed over the soundstage, a sound of relief. But beneath the noise, an unspoken truth lingered. A delicate trust had been shattered. The effortless magic of their shared laughter, once the heart of the show, would never feel quite the same. Harvey would remain until 1977, but his eventual exit was a quiet one, a stark contrast to the storm he had created. Years later, posed with the question by Entertainment Tonight, Carol's reflection was a study in contrasts. "Harvey," she said, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips, "gave me my biggest laughs and my biggest headaches." The incident, forever immortalized in industry lore as the Studio 33 blow-up, cemented its place as one of Hollywood's most legendary behind-the-scenes tales. But for Carol, it was more than a story. It was a profound lesson that even joy has a breaking point, and that kindness, when pushed to its absolute limit, can forge itself into steel. And while she masterfully navigated the storms on her set, a far more personal tempest was gathering at home, threatening to unravel her private world. Behind the velvet curtain of America's favorite comedy hour, a different kind of drama was unfolding, the slow decay of a marriage once hailed as a Hollywood fairy tale. Her union with the formidable producer Joe Hamilton. Their paths first crossed in 1960 on the set of The Gary Moore Show. She was the brilliant ingenue, the star on the ascent. And he, a decade her senior, was the established, respected producer. He became her anchor, her mentor, and her protector. When The Carol Burnett Show premiered in 1967, he was the unseen architect, the steady hand behind the camera who meticulously guided her ascent for years. Together, they were a force of nature, a perfect symphony of her heart and his precision. But as the mid-1970s wore on, the first discordant notes began to sound. As the show's fame reached stratospheric heights, Hamilton's guidance began to morph into control. He demanded final say over every guest, every script. He would often excise moments of genuine emotion, chasing a guaranteed punchline. Carol pushed back, insisting, audiences need heart as much as laughter. It was a simple creative difference, but it drew a line in the sand, the beginning of a slow, painful schism. And then, the whispers started. In August of 1979, TV Guide ran a blind item, a small paragraph hinting at a powerful television producer's entanglement with a young CBS editor. No names were printed. None had to be. On set, the truth was an open secret. Burnett held her silence, weathering a silent siege until 1982, when a discovery by her legal team revealed a betrayal that cut deeper than any rumor. Joe had secretly created Hamilton Productions, registering spin-offs born from The Carol Burnett Show, entirely under his own name. The crown jewel of this secret enterprise, Mama's Family, a world built from her characters, her creativity. The betrayal was absolute. The final confrontation took place in the sterile quiet of their CBS office. Her question was direct, weighted with years of shared history. How could you turn what we built together into something that is only yours? His reply was a wall of ice, devoid of any warmth. It's business, Carol, not emotion. And in that moment, the curtain fell. On the 3rd of March, 1983, the final curtain fell. She filed for divorce, igniting one of Hollywood's most vicious public battles over a shared empire. The courthouse became a circus, a storm of flashing cameras. Through it all, Carol remained a portrait of unwavering composure. When the gavel finally fell in 1984, she emerged not just with her dignity, but with the name of the show she built, and a full half of its syndication profits. Joe was awarded 40%. We were the best team, she would later reflect, until he forgot I was something more than just a business partner. Her words to People magazine hung in the air, a quiet epitaph for their union. But after the divorce, she had one last, silent message left to send. It arrived as white flowers at his funeral in 1991, with a simple note that read, "I wish you peace, Joe." A final, graceful act. But for Carol, another kind of coldness had already settled in long before, a night when the warmth of Hollywood seemed to vanish. In the glittering constellation of Hollywood, there was always a hierarchy, a pecking order beneath the Klieg lights, and in 1968, no star sat higher than Cary Grant. That was the year he was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Beverly Hilton, and in the audience, a guest of honor herself, was Carol Burnett, the undisputed heart of American television comedy. After the applause faded, she approached his table to offer her congratulations, a vision in a red Bob Mackie gown, radiating the confidence of her own hard-won success. What transpired in the next few seconds would become legendary, a moment frozen in the annals of Hollywood lore. A director at the table casually remarked, "Cary, have you seen Carol's show? The whole country is in love with it." A faint, dismissive smirk played on Grant's lips as he turned and replied, "Oh, asterisk that time's show. The one where she flails her arms about, contorts her face, and overacts. I simply cannot fathom why anyone would enjoy that sort of thing." A chill descended upon the table. The air grew thick, but Burnett, she didn't so much as flinch. Her gaze held steady as she met his. "Perhaps," she said, her voice even, "people prefer laughing with someone who feels real, rather than with someone who is perfect." And with that, she turned and walked away. 2 days later, a small headline in the Los Angeles Times made the private slight a public affair. Cary Grant and Carol Burnett, a frosty encounter. The reaction from her fans was immediate, and it was furious. The network, CBS, quickly released a statement in her defense, declaring, "Carol Burnett represents a humor that is both humane and intelligent, a laughter born from empathy, not from foolishness." But Grant, unswayed, doubled down. He told Variety he simply preferred a more refined humor, something perhaps more aligned with the European style. The jab was subtle, a velvet glove over a steel fist, but the entire town knew precisely who he was talking about, and so began a silent feud, a coldness that would shadow them for years to come. When Paramount came calling with an offer for them to co-star in a 1970 musical, she politely declined, citing a conflict in her schedule. But privately, to her trusted friends, the reason was far clearer. "I will not work with a man," she said, "who looks down on the way a woman laughs." Grant never offered a public apology. Years later, however, a private admission surfaced, a confession of sorts. "Carol, she's such a strong woman. She made me feel uneasy." That frosty encounter became more than just an anecdote. It was a defining moment, forging not only her public dignity, but her private understanding of power in a town that ran on it. She never fired back in the gossip columns. Her rebuttal was delivered on a much grander stage, the stage of success. Within just 3 years, she would claim 3 Emmy Awards, and The Carol Burnett Show solidified its place as a revered cornerstone of American television. But another, more perplexing silence lingered. Of all the dismissals Carol Burnett had endured, the one that echoed the longest came from a man she hardly knew, Lorne Michaels, the visionary creator of Saturday Night Live. For nearly half a century, Carol Burnett, the very pioneer who had blazed the trail for generations of female comedians, was never once invited to host SNL. The oversight grew into one of television's most enduring and curious mysteries. It began in 1975, the year Saturday Night Live first exploded onto the airwaves. As The Carol Burnett Show reigned supreme on CBS, critics saw a perfect opportunity. An episode hosted by Burnett would be a symbolic bridge uniting 2 distinct generations of comedy. But Lorne Michaels, it is alleged, summarily dismissed the notion. His reasoning, according to the book Live from New York, published in 2002, was simple: she doesn't fit the spirit of the show. The sentiment hardened over time. An editor would later recall hearing Michaels label her, in 1981, as the face of old television. The Washington Post later confirmed that Burnett herself had expressed an interest in hosting, an overture that was met with deafening silence from NBC. Her fans, once again, erupted. This time, hundreds of letters poured in. A groundswell of voices rose from across the nation, demanding to know why their comedic icon was being kept in the shadows. NBC's answer, when it came, was a carefully worded whisper. Guest hosts are chosen based on each season's content, the official line read. Yet, insiders spoke of a quiet hurt, a private wound. She never once aired in public. In the soft glow of a 1980s television studio, on Larry King Live, she met the question with a faint, knowing smile and replied, "Maybe I'm just not edgy enough for them." Decades dissolved into memory, and then, in 2023, the same network rolled out the red carpet, honoring her with a special Carol Burnett, 90 Years of Laughter and Love. When asked if she ever regretted not hosting that legendary stage, her response was a masterclass in quiet power. "I guess they didn't need me, but I didn't need them either." That single, elegant sentence shattered nearly 50 years of silence and set the digital world ablaze. Thousands of fans flooded social media, a torrent of support under a single hashtag. "Invite Carol to SNL," they wrote, demanding the network finally right a decades-old wrong. But Burnett's own message had already been sent, loud and clear. Kindness is its own form of power, and silence can resonate more profoundly than revenge. A lesson she would need again when mockery curdled into a lawsuit. By the 2000s, a new breed of comedy had seized the spotlight. It was louder, sharper, and often far crueler. At the forefront of this new guard was Seth MacFarlane, the creator of the animated juggernaut Family Guy. In 2006, a particular episode aired, featuring a fleeting, cutting parody of Burnett's most cherished character, the Charwoman. But this was no homage. The scene twisted her gentle, iconic image, placing it in a crude and deeply unflattering light. For Burnett, then 73 years old, the moment felt like a violation, a slap in the face. On April 16, 2007, she made her stand. She filed a lawsuit against 20th Century Fox and MacFarlane for $2 million, citing the unauthorized use of her likeness and the damage done to a reputation built on warmth and trust. "I'm not suing for money," she stated, her voice steady in a video message. "I just want people to remember that some characters belong to the hearts of the audience." The case ignited a national debate, as critics and audiences alike argued over the line where parody crosses into disrespect. In July of 2007, the court's gavel fell, dismissing the lawsuit under the protection of fair use. But in the court of public opinion, Burnett had won a resounding victory. The people stood with her. As Entertainment Weekly later observed, she didn't win in court, she won in history. Years later, at the glittering CBS 70th Anniversary Gala, fate seated Burnett and MacFarlane in the same row. As the cameras panned across the audience, MacFarlane offered a polite, almost tentative nod in her direction. Carol didn't return the gesture. She simply smiled, her eyes fixed forward, and clapped in rhythm with the music. For her, that was closure, quiet, dignified, and absolute. Carol Burnett's story is a testament to laughter, loyalty, and lessons learned in the unforgiving spotlight. She faced betrayal, disrespect, and arrogance. But she never, ever lost her grace. In the end, her silence spoke with more force than any feud. And so we ask you, which moment do you believe hurt her the most? The betrayal of the network, the insult to her character, or the mockery of her art? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay with us for more of Hollywood's untold stories.